All right. So remember when looking at U.S. history, we had to start off with the Spanish entry into what is now the Americas. It starts with Columbus. Columbus basically shows up in the Caribbean, and that gets the ball rolling. And the Spanish do settle in Florida around 5065. If you look at that year, it's much later than obviously 1492. And then we're talking about the Southwest, like New Mexico, California. Now we're moving closer to the late 17th century, and so even with the missions, we're talking late. We're talking in the 18th century. So on the Spanish side of things, it really is. You could kind of see how it is nowadays. That tells a lot of the story about how it all came about, considering that Latin America still has those Spanish roots, and there's just kind of isolated rootedness within the territory in the Southwest. So this week we need to talk about the English. So obviously we're talking about the United States history. The English have a big role to play in this history. And so for the English, it is these two dates that are important. First one is 1607 and the settling of Jamestown, which is in going to be in Virginia. And there's gold in this region, and so that obviously really attracts the English settlers. Probably the most famous like story connected to this is a Pocahontas story with John Smith, and there's a lot of debate on whether any of that is true or not. So I kind of just leave that there, um, just to say that the relationship between the Powhatans and the settlers seemed to be as good as while John Smith was around. The other thing about Jamestown is this is in 1619, and you might have heard about the 1619 project. I think the New York Times is doing. This is the first introduction to African slavery in an English colony. There is already African slavery in the Spanish colony, so it's not like that's really the first, but at least if you're thinking the English colonies, 13 English colonies, this is the first one that's brought in, and obviously for this course, we're ending around the Civil War, so obviously this gets us started in thinking about the legacy of slavery. Now, one of the questions that was posed, reflect on is just the difference between, at least within the Anglo-American mindset, about the founding of the United States. And even though there's a Pocahontas story with John Smith, a Disney cartoon and all of that, probably the most famous founding, or what's considered the real founding of the United States, is the Thanksgiving story with the Pilgrims and Puritans at Plymouth. So now we're talking about the Massachusetts area. We're talking about English settlers who are leaving for they're very kind of strong beliefs in Calvinism, this Protestant theology that believes in divine predestination and divine election, that God chooses you because you are neither, not because you're good or you're evil, but just out of God's own sovereign will. He chooses some to be part of his people. Um, and so the why I say this is kind of a founding myth is the fact that part of it is you have this contract drawn up on the Mayflower, the ship that they're sailing on. And so, if you think about like the legacy to the American Constitution, this fits very well with that narrative. And then, there's also, I know one of the documents I have for you to read is on the Wampanoags. And this is the group that will meet the pilgrims on that winter and help them survive, help them to harvest and actually settle down. Now the Wampanoags do this. They're led by their chief Massasoit. They do this because I mean, yeah, they're nice guys and all, but it's also the fact that it's a survival tactic. They realize that the settlers from Europe are not going to stop coming. They have their own enemies within other Native American groups, and so they figure why not ally themselves with some of the settlers, and so that'll be for protection. Now, the reason they're even able to communicate is one of the Native Americans is named Squanto, and Squanto was a former slave who escaped or got his freedom and knew the languages. So he's actually not from the Wampanoag group. He actually returns to the land, and his group is gone. So he joins with the Wampanoags, and he serves as a liaison between Massasoit and the English English settlers. So this first generation, generally speaking, they get along okay. Then it's like the second generation comes along, and you start to get conflicts brewing between the Native Americans in general and the growing number of English settlers. In fact, by 1628, you have the Massachusetts Bay Colony set up, and John Winthrop is the governor. And here you can kind of see again that Puritan Calvinist mindset where they now see their settlement as a quote unquote city on the hill. There is this kind of divine destiny attached to what the Puritans, these English Puritans, are doing here. And that idea of quote unquote city on the hill be one that's repeated throughout American history by even American presidents like Ronald Reagan. Okay, so as they're settling and they're bringing their livestock, and the livestock is like moving across Native American land, this starts to raise tensions. There's also, which is basically a hit job on the Pequots in 1636 that really starts to like sour, especially Native American allies to the English. This is known as the Mystic Massacre, and I would encourage you to watch this video here. Pretty depressing stuff, but it basically shows that they surround this territory middle of the night, and they basically massacre men, women, and children. Totally not a fair fight, and they do have Native American allies that assist them in this, but by all accounts, they're kind of like, I can't believe we're doing this kind of stuff. So, with that said and done, and there's other conflicts that happen between basically the 1630s to about the 1670s. This then pushes Massasoit's son, Metacomet, who's also nicknamed King Philip. It pushes him to rally a number of Native Americans under his banner. It's kind of pan-Indian troop. He basically says, like, I'm going to target and attack all the enemies of these Native American groups. And to be fair to him, I mean, it is a slaughter. He does go around slaughtering settlers. To be fair to him, those Anglo settlers who have been nice, who have the reputation of being nice Native Americans, they're not attacked. It's only the rest of the settlers. But that basically sets off a chain reaction where you have retaliation by the settlers, and they got the guns, and so along with other Native American allies, they're able to squash this Wampanoag-led army, and King Philip or Metacomet is murdered. His family is sold into slavery. So it's kind of the King Philip's War really is the one true Native American led war against the Europeans, where this might have been the time where they could have honestly had a legitimate chance of, stopping the growth of the English settlers. But this really ruins relationship between the two groups. And yes, throughout the history, there will be allies to the English over the years. Because again, you got to think of Native Americans not as just one monolithic whole. These are all little mini nations who have treaties with each other, but also have like sworn enemies towards each other. So, for example, that's going on. No, it's not in your notes, but that's going on over in the Southwest. The Apaches, the Comanches are bitter enemies, and in fact, Spain makes treaties with them as like sovereign nations. So that's reality. And in some ways, there's going to be Native American tribes who are going to be, loyal to the British, and then loyal to the Americans, and in general do all right in history. But in most cases, it's a lot of promises, broken promises, and then quote unquote Indian wars or Indian removal. So keep that in mind. That is part of this narrative as more and more English come, and that means that you're getting more and more Native American groups either basically being pushed off to the west. And we'll see that's going to be a continuing thread through this class. Okay, so I'll start up a new video to pick up on the rest of the lecture.